And now I turn to the substance of the charges, but before I do, a word or two about the geopolitical context. The scourge of illegal narcotics is not unique to the Philippines. As we all know, it afflicts Latin America, where I can name 3 countries where the death rate at the hands of vigilantes and law enforcement agents per capita population is higher than it ever was under Duterte. And as you should know, and you will hear from the prosecution, at any rate, the Philippines as a country is uniquely positioned to act as a transit hub for the trafficking of narcotics emanating from the cartels in China. And with or without Duterte, so we argue, the death rate would have kept on rising. Indeed, as we will prove with statistics and reports, the death rate flowing from narcotics-related crime actually increased after Rodrigo Duterte left power. And where, I ask you, has the International Criminal Court been since? Now, a colleague of the victim's representative sitting opposite, a certain self-styled legal assistant to ICC counsel, rose up and famously stated in one of her many voluble interviews to the media that Rodrigo Duterte conducted not a war on drugs, but a war on the poor. A war on the poor, I ask you? If anything, the totally lawful Duterte campaign against illegal drugs and their suppliers took place when his administration was actively promoting some of the most important redistributive policies in years, all with the aim of alleviating poverty. Legislative reform in 2017 to reduce personal income taxes for workers, social protection expansion known as the 4 Ps, designed to provide regular cash transfers to needy and multi-child families, universal health care, and need I say more, the Magna Carta of the poor, setting out the right to adequate food, decent shelter, education and a highest standard of health. The fact that the majority of those who died as a result of drug-related crime were living in the most deprived areas is something which is endemic to every afflicted society. But can anyone seriously accuse this man, Rodrigo Duterte, who has lived such an openly frugal existence, of taking up arms against the needy? This is the man who, at the age of 5, arrived in Davao to live in a modest shack where rain leaked through the roof, forcing him to crawl under the kitchen table to take shelter. This is not the man born with a silver spoon in his mouth and groomed for the presidency from childhood. This is the man who was born to a lawyer and a governor who taught him discipline, values, and respect for the people by being one of the people. This is the man who, as president himself, shunned the luxuries and the privileges of high office, and like others before him, and even those after him, he slept not in the palatial grandeur of the Malacanang, but in Spartan quarters of his bodyguard's hut. His diet consisted not of prime cuts of imported Australian beef, but of dried fish and boiled rice. A man of simple indulgences, his pleasures were to be found not on the cocktail party circuit of Forbes Park, but on coastal roads where he roamed and cruised on his motorcycle, not looking for people to kill, Mr. Prosecutor, but almost killing himself because of his love for speed. This is the man who paid and paved his way through law school, passing his bar exam in 1972, more or less on the same day as Marcos Sr.'s tanks were grinding and rolling their way through the streets after the declaration of martial law. And it was on that significant day that Rodrigo Duterte was exposed to the tyranny of oppression and the abuse of power by the elite, and he took a decision. On that day, he chose to devote himself to a life of selfless public service. As a professor at the local police academy and as a public prosecutor in Davao, Rodrigo Duterte developed a lifelong passion, some would say an enduring obsession, for law and order, something for which he unapologetically enforced throughout his time as mayor of Davao City. Not, as the prosecution say, through sowing murder and mayhem, but through winning the love respect and admiration of his fellow citizens, the very same citizens who continued to re-elect him time after time, term after term, on no less than 7 occasions over more than 2 decades. And throughout his 20 or so years tenure as the mayor of Davao, Rodrigo Duterte and his family transformed that city from an outpost of communist insurgency and criminal violence into what is now one of the safest cities, not just in the Philippines, but in the entire world. This was indeed the so-called Davao model, which the prosecution wants to persuade you was code for unbridled criminal violence. And this was the type of leader that the Filipino nation wanted in 2016. So, Rodrigo Duterte was elected into power, not in spite of, but specifically because of his firm and uncompromising commitment to upholding law and order. And after his election as president, Rodrigo Duterte remained a man of the people, without seeking to patronize the people. Gung-ho in his ways and with a belligerent tone, he spoke the tough tongue of the street, not the dissembling discourse of international diplomacy. He said what the people wanted to hear, but he said it in a way that offended sensibilities of world leaders unaccustomed to hearing it, one in particular, and that was what set him on the slippery slope to a prison cell in The Hague. And let me tell you how it works. It starts with the media, controlled by the powerful and the politically influential. With a sensational headline and a twisted editorial slant, the moguls sell their papers while promoting the partisan agenda of their backers in power. They highlight the salacious content while ignoring the true context, because that is what captivates the reader. And so it was with Rodrigo Duterte, whose speeches were fertile fodder for his enemies and detractors, a man whose hyperbole, bluster and rhetoric, once published, became a natural target for privately funded NGOs and human rights activists, a loose collective more commonly known as civil society. These people descended upon the Philippines to advance an agenda even more lacking in objectivity than that of the media, and heavily funded by tycoons with even grander designs, they print their glossy reports, replete with iconic photographic images of grieving families and dead bodies in rain-swept, nighttime crime scenes, all dramatically illuminated with the fluorescent glow of neon. Images carefully crafted to shock the conscience and to sway the emotions, and, I may say, to be used by the prosecutor when they don't even relate to the charges. And they gave their slick reports bold titles lifted straight out of a James Bond movie, such as License to Kill, One Shot to the Head, You Can Die Any Time, or simply, They Just Kill. The photographers are feted and their shots exhibited as art all over the world, and the brave journalists who act as their sources win awards and Nobel Prizes. And slowly but surely, their narrative becomes the sacred, unchallengeable and unshakable truth. And so the pressure builds up, and the academics who haunt the corridors of the progressive left law faculties far away in the United States tweet their research and publish their articles pontificating about crimes against humanity, systematic attacks against the civilian population, and they point their finger at one man alone, and bandy about slogans such as accountability and the prevention of impunity. They give their gratuitous advice on what should be done, sometimes academics who formerly worked alongside the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. Communications and complaints are filed, and the rest, as they say, is history.